Welcome back to another episode of the Tiga Tactics podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Evan Perperis. I'm joined by one of the Tiga Tactics co-founders, Patrick Vuong. Patrick, say hi.
What's up, interwebs?
Yeah. Today we're going to be deep diving into Patrick's background. I'm super excited because I love hearing about all the different styles and training he's done over the years, and just kind of show you a little bit of where Tiga Tactics came from through some of his personal background. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Patrick, and I will interject as I see fit to ask some follow-up questions and some clarification. So I guess just kind of tell me about how you started getting involved in martial arts and start taking me through that journey.
Absolutely. I have been obsessed with martial arts ever since I was, oh wow, actually I don't even remember a time before martial arts. It's that's how embedded it is in my life. And I have to, thank three people. The first person is my father, not because he's a martial artist, but because he had a love for martial arts. He this kind of is written in my DNA, but when he was a kid, he would go to the movie theater and watch old Chinese movies with his dad because his dad is Chinese, and so he would my grandfather would take my dad to go watch these old wuxia movies, the old period piece kung fu movies, and he became obsessed with kung fu movies. And so when I got older, he would we didn't have kung fu movie theaters in Canada where I was born and raised, but we obviously had VHS, and so we'd watch VHS tapes of kung fu movies, and that's the paternal side of my family. That's where the martial arts love comes from. But on my maternal side, apparently we have martial arts all through my lineage, and I'm not sure if my cousin Conrad, when you guys listen to his martial arts specific podcast, I don't know if he delved into that at all, but
Not really.
my co-founder. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, my co-founder Conrad, he and I are cousins, and my mother, we're on. He's my cousin on my maternal side, and our mothers are sisters, and my mother told me that her uncles and her, I guess, granduncles, they were all martial artists, and they would do like crazy training where they would dig a hole in the ground and they jump out of the hole, and over time they dig a deeper hole until they could just jump out, almost like box jumping, but like back in the day.
Reverse
And
box jumping. Yeah. No, it's cool.
right. Yeah, because this is like the 1920s. Where are you gonna find a box to jump on? So, and of course the legend grows that it was 8 feet deep and they could jump out with one single try. So so apparently we've had a whole lineage of martial artists, and then they got into the military and they fought in different wars to defend Vietnam. So yeah, I've got the Chinese martial arts side, I've got the Vietnamese martial arts side, and the second person who influenced my training was Bruce Lee. In after the 70s, he became humongous, and my dad, of course, immediately loved him, and so like I said before, I have no memory of a time there of Bruce Lee not being in my life. And so he was just a powerful influence. I remember, acting like him when I was like 3 years old and doing all the sound effects, and like kicking and fighting with my cousins and messing around and reenacting Enter the Dragon. Which now that I look back, I should not have been watching that when I was 3 years old because it's an R-rated movie.
Yeah.
But there's some drug use, violence, nudity. But anyway, but yeah, just a huge influence. And as I got older into my teens, I started reading up about him, and learning his life and realizing that he was also a philosopher too, and not just this dude who's in movies. And he founded his own system of martial arts. And so I was like, wow, this guy's really cool. And for a long time, he was really the only Asian person in mainstream media in the West, Canada and America. So, and then the third person who influenced my love of martial arts is, as I mentioned before, my cousin Conrad. He's my older cousin, and so I've all my life he's been a martial artist. He's been a black belt. I didn't know him before he was a black belt, so I only know him martial artist. So he gave me a lot of tips growing up on self defense and things like that. And then I'd always wanted to do it even when I was like 3 years old imitating Bruce Lee. But my parents never let me enroll in formal training because I had asthma. I have asthma. I still have asthma, and they always thought that, oh man, if he does any sort of athletic endeavor, he'll just die. They would literally say, no, you might die. You can't do this. So um and I always thought like they were just babying me, but as I got older I realized like, oh yeah, I did have several, asthma attacks when I was a kid. I could have easily died, especially if they're not around to help me. So I always felt like I was, I don't know, that they didn't care for me, but in turn they were actually there trying to save my life. So I appreciate the concern, but eventually I joined northern Shaolin Kung Fu school, and that was my first foray into formalized training. But before I get deep into that, I did want to say that Conrad did show me some of his Taekwondo, some of his Jeet Kune Do, some of his Kali at the time. This is in the early 90s. And I remember writing letters to him because this was before email. This is how old I am. We didn't have email at the time. So I couldn't just, calling long distance, for those of you who are not old enough, you just can't,
Expensive.
like, yeah, you
It's
couldn't just turn on your
expensive.
cell.
It was like a
You
big
couldn't,
deal to call long distance. I
yeah,
remember being like my parents would be like, "I'm calling Greece." I'd be like, "Oh, you know, we can't
yeah,
afford that."
yeah, yeah. The call must have been like $100 or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be like super quick.
Yeah,
All right, just say hi. Just say hi to your, your great aunt or whatever, and then we'll hang up real quick. Okay.
right. Yeah, yeah. So we I never dared call him long distance, so we had to write letters on paper and mail it. And I would ask him, hey, what martial arts should I learn? I'm about ready, and he would kind of give me some suggestions. The problem is, like, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is Edmonton is the capital city of Alberta, so you'd think, hey, it's a capital city, it should be pretty big, but it's actually pretty small. It's a small-ish city, small to medium. Now it's growing, but back then there weren't a lot of martial arts schools. You had the typical kung fu schools, but they were kind of secretive. They didn't really market, so it was hard to find them. And then of course you had taekwondo and karate. But I wanted to try to do something that was as close to Bruce Lee as possible, and we all know that Bruce Lee did his own version of kung fu. So I was trying to find kung fu schools, couldn't really find them. And then I saw the UFC, again on VHS tape. Somebody recorded it illegally, and I saw these guys like grappling and ground and pound and all this stuff. I was like, oh man, I gotta learn that jujitsu. I don't know what the heck this is. It's not judo. It's not wrestling. What is this? And of course, there are no Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools in Edmonton. There were barely any in America, let alone in Canada. So
No,
I couldn't
I
find a
tried
jiu-jitsu
finding
school.
one in early 2000s and I couldn't.
Hmm.
It was like none. I was like, oh, I guess I'll do karate instead. So
And where were you in New Jersey,
I was in
maybe?
Long Island, New
Long
York. That's
Island.
like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's suburbs like the length of Long Island. It's just like like wall to wall or end to end
Mm-hmm.
suburbs. And I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find I mean, I guess I looked in my hometown and like the neighboring ones. I didn't look that far, but there was not a
Mm-hmm.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. This was like 2003, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and right, UFC
Uh,
had been around for almost a decade by that point,
mm-hmm.
or about
Mm-hmm.
a decade. So,
Yeah, that's crazy. And my current Brazilian Jiu Jitsu professor right now, Professor Danny Soares, he actually grew up in New York, in the city, and he said in the late '90s, obviously UFC has been well known amongst martial artists by then. By that time, he could not find a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu coach, so he actually learned judo and wrestling, and a
uh,
guy and a guy who taught him Japanese Jiu Jitsu, because that was kind of like his holdover until he could learn Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, because he was competing in mixed martial arts, and he needed to find that missing piece. So it's interesting that, yeah, like, despite how much of a big deal UFC was, it's still hard. And to me, in New York City, the East Coast, that's a hub of martial arts too.
yeah, yeah.
So for you to have problems finding it, that's how rare it was, uh,
Yeah.
at the turn of the century.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the kung fu style. So it was a lot of forms. Was there sparring? Was there pressure test or anything, or was it like more self-development, flexibility type stuff?
Mm-hmm. This was it was called Northern Shaolin Chun Fa, which Chun Fa basically means fist way. And but we just, when people ask, we just do kung fu, Shaolin kung fu, uh, and Shaolin being the famous temple where all the monks train and stuff like that. So Northern Shaolin. So this is a cool thing. My teacher didn't know this, but of course Conrad knew this. That because it was Northern Shaolin, it was the northern part of China. A lot of people, if you looked at it and you didn't know that we were practicing kung fu, you'd think it was taekwondo because there's a lot of high kicking.
Oh,
And
interesting.
Conrad explained to me that basically a lot of the taekwondo that he learned had come from northern China, so basically northern Shaolin kung fu. And so my style, the northern Shaolin system, was basically the predecessor to a lot of the high kicking Korean systems.
Interesting.
And yeah, yeah, so it was pretty cool. So I felt really honored to learn this this system that predated a lot of things that we know now in modern times. And I would say that the system was a pretty good mix of everything in terms of traditional martial arts. So
Hmm.
you'd have to we do tons of stretching because again we have to do a lot of kicking. So we'd warm up a little bit, we do a lot of stretching. We would do traditional blocks, stances, things like that. We do what we call two-step sparring, where like one person would punch, the other person would defend and counter.
Oh yeah,
We
yeah,
would
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then we would do sparring. Sparring was a big part because we entered a lot of competition. So we do a lot of both karate tournaments, kung fu tournaments, and just open tournaments. So you could be fighting any style. And then we did forms, and forms was definitely a big part of it too. So forms, for people who don't know, are basic kata is prearranged movements where it looks like you're fighting imaginary bad guys, and it's basically just a catalog of all your techniques.
Yeah.
And that's another cool thing with Northern Shaolin is that if you looked at at least the first few forms of Northern Shaolin, it looked very similar to the forms that you might find in karate or in taekwondo, and that's because both the Japanese, the early Japanese martial artists and the early Korean martial artists, they literally just they learned the kung fu system and then they adapted it to their own. So I think for a time, certain karate styles, certain Korean systems, their first few forms were literally my kung fu forms. So it was really cool. It was based on the eye pattern on the ground, the letter I, the letter I. So it was pretty cool to have that shared lineage.
Yeah, well, next time we meet up, I don't know if you still remember some of them. I'd be curious to see some of the basic movements because the style of Kenpo karate I did was supposedly comes from Shaolin roots, and our first
Mm-hmm.
couple of forms are come in that eye pattern where you come like on the
Mm-hmm.
base of the eye, and then you up the stem, and then across the top, and then back down. Um,
Yes, yes.
so I'd be curious to see how
Yeah, yeah.
close they align.
And that's the cool thing to one of the cool things about martial arts and why I stuck to it is because you learn about history and culture and warfare because of that overlap. There's always a sharing of culture when different countries and nations come together to whether it's to fight or whether it's to do trade. And so yeah, like it's pretty cool to see how Japanese take a form and modify it to their own. And yeah, I'd love to kind of trade notes with you when we get together again. Northern Shaolin. So that was my first formal system. I dabbled a bunch of stuff because of my friends and my family. Aikido, Wing Chun, Jeet Kune Do, Kali, Taekwondo because of Conrad. But Northern Shaolin was really my first art, and I did it for about 2 years. I got to green belt, which in our system that's about intermediate, and I had to stop, and it was more of a was it a moral dilemma for me. Not because I didn't want to train and not because I wasn't good at it. It was because I found out my instructor was kind of a fraud, sort of. Unfortunately, um, he uh, he was a very good martial artist, and he mentored me. But I started to realize that he's kind of a bit of a fraud. He would Northern Shaolin. If you know martial arts, you know that the Shaolin martial arts generally you have a certain set of weapons. They're usually non-lethal, but we do have swords and things like that. But then all of a sudden one summer he started teaching the nunchaku or the nunchucks, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, like I'm not an expert, I'm not a black belt, but I know that nunchucks are Okinawan or
Okay, now,
Japanese.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they have nothing to do with China or Shaolin monks. This is really weird. And so he started teaching one of the brown belts this nunchuck form. And I was like, oh, it's, weird. Okay, whatever. Maybe somewhere along the line it came from China. I don't know. And then I went to our local martial arts supply store and I started talking to the owner. And the owner's like, "Oh yeah, your instructor here. He was here, a few months ago. He bought my nunchuck video." I was like, "What?" Like he was apparently he had bought these. I don't know who made these videos, but he started buying all these videos from other systems and trying to memorize them and teach them to his students and pawn them off as like his own system or as part of the northern Shaolin system.
Mm.
And I was like, this is very suspicious. And if you get to know me, I was always raised to be, have integrity and be honest. And when it came to martial arts, I was even more like quote unquote religious about it. And so to have an instructor teach something that is not part of our system, but to claim that it is, or to claim that as part of his history, it just seemed really shady to me. And then I stuck around for a little bit more. I felt very uncomfortable, but I stuck around a little bit more because I wasn't quite at brown belt, so I didn't have to worry about learning that stupid nunchuck form. Um, Not that it's stupid, because I'm sure it was fine, but it wasn't Northern Shaolin. And I found out that he started like flirting with all the female students. That's why they stopped showing up. And I don't.
Mm.
There was like rumor that he like nowadays he would have been totally canceled. Nowadays they would say that he's a sexual abuser and all this stuff. But back in the '90s, they would have been like, oh, he's a little horny, and then they would just like write it off as that.
Right,
But
right, right.
but nowadays he definitely would have been canceled. So apparently he would say some inappropriate stuff and like try to like flirt with them and maybe touch them and things like that. And maybe possibly grope them. So that was kind of like the last straw for me where I'm like, I can't,
Yeah.
I don't want to go all the way to black belt and be known as a student of this fraudulent, possibly, criminal instructor. So,
As I've gotten more into martial arts, it's interesting to hear stories like that where like you have to remember just because someone's really good at one specific thing doesn't necessarily mean they are knowledgeable about everything, and they get put on
mm-hmm.
this pedestal because of their martial arts skill, probably
Mm-hmm.
justifiably so because they're an instructor, right? But
Right.
then they start giving out, more detailed life advice, and then they start using that position of power to influence maybe people um, who are their students who are in this inferior position and uh,
Right.
take advantage of them. So, just something to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're Connor and I are, a lot of people send us emails and say, hey, yeah, what should I train in and where should I go? And we always say, you got to go there. You got to watch the instructor teach. You obviously do a Google search that will come up with, if he's been arrested for anything or if she's been arrested for anything. And just really get to know him as a person, because the style honestly doesn't really matter too much. It does, but it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like when you're starting off, it honestly any style is better than no style. And
Sure.
Connor and I are we're very non-denominational. We're not true we're not true believers
I
in
love when
anything.
you guys say that. I think it's fun,
Yeah,
hysterical.
yeah. We believe that any training is better than no training,
Yeah.
and especially when you first start off. As you get better, obviously, you'll want to funnel into more specific styles that are more effective. But
And it'll also
but
depend on your goals, right? I mean, some people are in
mhm,
it for fitness, some are in it for social atmosphere, some will want like I want stuff I can actually use on the street 100%. Other people are in it for sport and competition,
right,
right? So that's
right.
going to play a huge role, in addition to your personality, right? Like sometimes you fit better with one school as opposed to another school. So,
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, you got to look at your own goals, and then based on that, you ask the instructors a lot of questions. Where did they learn? Who is your instructor? What do you do if this happens in class? You got to ask them it should seem like very innocent questions, but how they answer will really give you a big clue of how they are as a person, not
yeah.
just as a teacher. So, um, yeah, so it was interesting to kind of like, and again, I was just a teenager, but I kind of started getting that weird feeling that this instructor is probably not somebody I want to be associated with. So I took some time off, and I stopped training probably for a few months, and then that's when my friends, uh, my childhood friends, actually, they just swung by. Again, we don't have cell phones. There's no text messaging, no email, and they just swung by, literally rang the doorbell and said, "Hey, are you still training?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And they're like, "Great, because you can join our Kenpo school." And so, just by sheer coincidence, they were looking to recruit more people, and I was looking for for a place to train, I was kind of like not not totally turned off by martial arts, but you know, I don't know if you wouldn't call it depressed, but I was just kind of like, I want to take a big step back,
It lost
you
some
know.
of its mystique. It's lost, it's a
Hmm.
little, yeah. I got you.
Yeah, yeah. So I wasn't really actively searching for an instructor, and they just happened to pop by, and it was a great thing that they did because their instructor turned out to be Margit Hilbig, Master Margit Hilbig, and um, she was the first female black belt in Canada. And I had eventually done some research, and I got to know her really well, and we thought that she was the first black belt, period. But turned out there was a judo black belt who got awarded before her. But she was the first. So we say she was the first karate black belt awarded in Canada. Um, and she was a very unique individual. Anybody who's done martial arts for a long time in Canada will know who she is because she was very influential in spreading martial arts, especially in Western Canada. And I'd never thought to, not to be sexist, but I'd never thought to train with a woman before. But once I met her, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna definitely, stick with her. She was this 5'3" German woman. She was an orphan during World War II, and basically just, not raised herself, but kind of, like just a very determined individual who didn't take BS from anybody. Moved to Canada on her own, more or less, and started training with. In the '60s, she started training with Ed Parker in his Kenpo system, and she got to meet Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, and whenever they came to train, she got to train with them. And of course, she'd always tell me like they were just regular people; they weren't world famous at the time. So it would just be like, "Hey, Joe, what's going on?" Or "Hey,
Yeah.
Bob, what's new?" Like they were just regular people to her, right? And then later on, they blew up, and and so it's just kind of cool to have her bring that history to our training sometimes too. And she's a very unique individual, and she trained like old school style. So she didn't do a lot of screaming, but if she looked at you in a certain way, you knew you messed up and you better smarten up. She read it very much old school, kind of militaristic. Everybody has rank, everybody's got to bow. You should, keep your mouth shut when we're teaching you, that kind of thing. If you did something wrong, you got to do push-ups. So very, in my opinion, that's what martial arts training is. But nowadays, it might seem a little harsh. Uh, uh, but yeah, I learned a lot from her. I eventually got my black belt, my first degree black belt through her in her Kenpo system. I do have to say for the hardcore martial artists, it's not the Kenpo that you see nowadays. It's more or less the Kenpo that she learned in the mid to late '60s. So I would not say it's modern in any way, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's just older. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know, Evan. What's Kenpo did you learn?
So supposedly comes from Shaolin Kempo. It's a Shaolin Kempo. So
Mhm.
the grandmaster that lives in Kansas City, like he was a break off of one of the was it U I can't remember the acronym. It was
USSD.
yeah, that's it. That's what it was. So it's a break off of that, and he modified it based off of all the different styles he's trained. So
Gotcha. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So yours is probably more modern than ours. My Kenpo system is even older than that. So
yeah, like
us.
on a couple of my belt tests, we actually rolled like did jujitsu in the
Mhm.
like as part of the belt test, and
Oh,
so
cool.
there was still like a lot of traditional stuff and bowing and like some forms and stuff,
Mhm.
some traditional weapons, but there's also like we had a lot of really good sparring, and I think it's a several schools in the area. My personal instructor, I feel like I really clicked well with him, and if I
Mhm.
had not saying anything bad about the other instructors, but if I had gone to one of the other schools, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much. I'll just say
Mhm.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Your instructor makes a huge difference. Obviously, as I've encountered as well, and so that's a big part of it too. And so so it's an older Kimpo system, but as Connor likes to say, hey, there's nothing wrong with a '68 Ford Mustang. They're still really cool, but obviously, in performance wise, they don't compare against a 2023 or 2024 Ford Mustang, right? So I always thought that was a great analogy is to use muscle cars.
Mm.
And so my Kenpo system, I love my Kenpo system, but it's definitely not a modern system. So I eventually moved away from Canada. I moved to California to to go to university to study journalism. So I started training at the Kung Fu Club at my university at Cal State Fullerton. It's the Cal State Fullerton Kung Fu Club, and our Kung Fu there was a hybrid Kung Fu system. And because I'd always want to be like Bruce Lee, even though it's not Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee system, it was still kind of closer to him because it was a Chinese system, but it was a hybrid system. So I would combine Hung Gar, Choy Li Fut, some other family systems, mix it all together, and it was very, I would say it was very kung fu, but just not to any specific branch. So we did, we did the five animal techniques with tiger claw and all that stuff, snake. We have a lot of forms. I learned even more forms. Nothing compared to what Conrad knows. He knows literally like dozens and dozens. But in my system, I think I ended up having to memorize like 13, 12 or 13 forms. And I eventually earned my second degree background in that system. And I really like that system because it was similar enough to Kenpo, but a little bit more, I don't want to say more practical because it's still a traditional martial art, but a little more sneaky. So we would advocate for kicking to the balls. We would advocate for, putting your fingers in people's eyeballs. We would basically advocate all the cheating that, it would be dishonorable in Kenpo. So that was kind of a cool aspect to learn more quote unquote dirty fighting.
Nice.
And
Nice.
and so I really love that. I really love that system. But again, it's still traditional martial art, right? So it's not going to be the first thing that I would teach somebody if they want to defend themselves on the street. But as a martial artist, I loved it because we'd use the weapons. We'd have staff, sword, the kwando, which is the big halberd with a massive blade on the end of a stick. Just a lot of really cool weapons that you see in all those Chinese movies. I got to learn how to use them, and that taught me how no one's going to be walking down the street with a halberd in their hand, right? But I could easily adapt those techniques to like a broomstick, or in my case, I'm Canadian, so I'd have a hockey stick. Or if you think about the shorter weapons, they could be like baseball bats or flashlights and things like that. And so it taught me to pick up a weapon and make it a part of my body. So it wasn't just this thing that I'm swinging wildly. It was immediately like an extension of my bone. That's the way that we were taught.
Nice.
That the moment you pick up this staff or this halberd, it is an extension of your bone. So when you move, it moves.
Nice.
And
I've learned some of them, some of the weapon systems I self-taught. Some of them I've actually been like school trained. But I've liked that. Once I feel like some of the movements you learn with one weapon system, a lot of times they'll carry over. It's like very similar. Where it's like, oh, I know how to do that with a knife. Well, now I can do it with a staff, and now I can do it with nunchucks. It's like almost the same
right.
hand movement. So I really like that, and as far as body mechanics and stuff like that. And plus, I think it's fun. I call them a lot of my weapons stuff. I call it stupid human tricks, right? Because it's just like it's like, it's like, am I gonna fight someone with nunchucks? Probably not. I was like, but
Right.
it's entertaining, and
Yes,
it's like a for the I guess the modern generation, it's like big fidget spinners, right? Like you
exactly.
spin them around, and you keep your hands and mind occupied, lets you work on something. So
Yes, yes. I don't want to offend millions of people or stomp at anybody's ancestors, but I do have to say, like the nunchaku, like I can use it. I'm probably not as good as you. I can use it. It's a lot of fun to use, but I think they're the worst martial art weapon ever devised known to mankind.
they're pretty
Like
bad.
if you want to like hurt yourself or knock yourself out, by all means, pick up a pair of nunchucks.
Oh, I've hit myself in the elbow with nunchucks,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I made my whole arm go numb. Like, I mean, like if I was in a real situation, like someone would have just mauled me because I couldn't move
Yeah.
my hand. I was like, oh no! I'm in my driveway, like screaming.
Right, right. Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's extremely painful. The whole idea of using a flexible weapon that is so short and you don't have full control over it, it just boggles the mind. But we as it came from Okinawa and it was disguised as a farming implement, and
yeah,
that's how the Okinawans justified using it. But in terms of warfare or self defense, oh man, I definitely would not pick that. That would be the last weapon. Or
Agreed. The effective range is so specific. Like if you're too far, it's absolutely no good. And then if you're too close, it's also like really bad. There's like a very small window where it's like this will hurt you. And it really won't
right,
hurt. Like it'll hurt to the point where you'll be like, ow, dude, that really hurt. Like, it's not
right,
gonna like the guy's gonna attack you like really hard
right.
afterwards.
Yeah,
I've also heard some interesting, we won't get into it now. I've heard some interesting things about like some of the Okinawan heritage and some of the weapons, basically being like the only people who had time to do martial arts were the wealthier class. So a lot
hmm
of
hmm
the like supposed farming, original farming usage is like not actually true.
yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised because there are just so many, again, martial arts myths. Conrad and I delve into these martial arts fantasies, martial arts myths.
Yeah.
A lot of these things that are told and passed down are just folk tales, basically.
Yeah. We'll have to dive into some of those on a different episode. But all right, let's keep
Absolutely,
keep
absolutely.
cruising, keep cruising here.
Yeah, yeah. So after I got my secondary black belt in kung fu, our system name is Lai Chung Chun Fa. Um, Lai Chung was the Chinese name of our founder, and Chun Fa means this way, basically. We named it that because his name is Ted Lai, but his Chinese name is Lai Chung. He'd been teaching kung fu since the 70s, around the same time as Bruce Lee, actually. And like Bruce Lee, he didn't discriminate. He taught it to everybody and anybody. But he just called it kung fu. He never named it. He never named it anything in particular. And so we named it after him in his honor, because he was humble and didn't want to didn't want to seem like he created a whole system on his own. He didn't have that ego. So, but anywai, so after Lai Chung Chun Fa, I started training in Pekiti-Tirsia Kali, which is a Filipino martial art system, and that's when I really got an eye-opening experience in weapons. If you know Filipino martial arts, you know that its specialty is knife, sword, stick, but there's also empty hand and wrestling as well. And so Pekiti-Tirsia is a very effective traditional martial art. It's still a traditional system, but I'd say it's very effective. The applications to self defense there are a lot more, much more applicable in real life. A little more modern. The there are flow drills and like very specific disarms and things like that maybe don't apply realistically, but generally speaking, if you learn the concepts, you'll be able to apply them much more readily in a life and death situation for real. And so I'm a group leader, certified instructor in that under Chuan Jared Wihangi. For those of you who don't know him, he's a SWAT officer.
Yeah, famous. Yeah.
Yeah, SWAT officer, defensive
Try.
tactics instructor. He teaches special operation forces all over the world, and he's been a lifelong martial artist as well. So I've been fortunate enough to train under him. He's a exceptional athlete, but also a really cool human being, and I got to hear a lot of his interesting stories. And just everybody as part of our Pekiti-Tirsia Tactical Association, they're all just really cool, very humble. They're all very deadly, but very welcoming. And that kind of opened my eyes. I do have to throw in a caveat that Conrad did expose me to Kali much, much earlier, probably like 15 years earlier than that. So I kind of had a foundation of how Filipino martial arts works with the flow drills, the angles, and things like that. But with Pekiti, some of the angles are slightly different, but the concepts all work. Every good Filipino martial arts system will emphasize the triangle footwork, will emphasize the basic angles, whether you number them the same way or not, and how to close that gap from long range, medium, and short. And so I'm very fortunate to still be learning this system and to be teaching it as well. Just a very fun and deadly system. And then in addition to that, I am also a handgun instructor. So I've been doing firearms for a while. I used to be the senior editor of Recoil Magazine, which is a gun lifestyle magazine, and through that I got really a deep dive into the tactical world. That's where I got to meet a lot of special operation forces veterans and those currently in service. Sailors, soldiers, paratroopers, all of them, all amazing people. So I got to learn their mindset, and that really got me interested into really delving into firearms. And I know that's kind of like a political topic nowadays, and a lot of people, hate it or want to abolish it, and some people love it, and that's their entire life. To me, I try not to make it political. Whatever you believe in terms of firearms, that's really up to you. But the way I look at it is a firearm is just another tool.
Yeah.
If you go back centuries, the samurai, they used firearms as well. They didn't think of it as like, oh, I can't use this. This is evil, but my katana, that's not evil. To me, they're all tools, and it's how you use them that determines whether you're good or bad.
Yeah.
And so I think of a firearm as just another inanimate object. And I love almost all weapons. If I laid all my weapons on the ground and you said, "Hey, pick the best one," I would be like choosing your favorite child. Like
Yeah.
that would be painful to me. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that in the current situation, firearms are the most effective tool that you could have, and so why not have that at your disposal? As Conrad taught me when I was much younger, he didn't come up with the saying because it's everywhere, but he basically told me it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Right.
And so that's why I delved into that. I started training in it. Really, I first started training in firearms so that I knew how to stop it, or AKA stop it or disarm somebody who has a gun. And then as I got into training, I realized that's very difficult to do.
Oh,
But hey, you know what? Let's just dive in and learn everything that I can about this tool. Because as we like to say, the knife, the gun, the stick, that's your tool. You are the weapon. Don't make the tool the weapon and you become the tool, right? So study as much as you can, learn everything that you can, and then be able to adapt as quickly as possible to what you're given and what is a part of your own tool set. And not to me, I try to stay away from the politics of it, because I believe that's a personal thing.
yeah.
And really, it should just be about training, your own training, making you the weapon, making you as deadly as possible.
Yeah. I agree. And I think some people when they hear guns, they don't like, to me, guns is still part of martial arts, right? They get, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
it's just another tool. I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes in America, we're like, oh, well, boxing's boxing, wrestling's wrestling, and firearms are firearms. Then there's martial arts, which is all Asian stuff, and it's like, well, now I would like wrestling's part of martial arts, like boxing's part of martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Firearms is part of martial arts, right? Um,
Yes.
so even within the army, right, we have a combatives program, and sometimes people are like, oh, well, that's just like Army's Fight Club. It's like, well, like part of our basic and tactical and master's course, we talk about weapons retention and you know, uh, you know, transitioning to other weapons and stuff like that. So right, so it's part of our style,
Mm-hmm.
the implementation and use of weapons. So
Right.
that's um, something as a someone who's involved in the Army Combatives program, like a hurdle we still are like trying to get over when we talk to people that are in charge and try to get more soldiers to come through the course and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think we have to look at it holistically, and that's kind of where Tiga Tactics comes from. You should be as adept at every tool set that you have, whether it's empty-handed, wrestling, grappling. We love martial arts, but again, we're non-denominational, and that goes with tools as well. So just try to learn as much as you can, be as skilled and versatile as you can be.
yeah, agree, strongly agree. So a couple more questions, and then we're going to start wrapping it up. You mentioned Jared Wahangi before. Have you had an exposure to his TRICOM training system? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. Just he kind of, the cool thing about Jared is that he kind of gives me the behind the scenes stuff sometimes. I unfortunately have not been able to attend his seminars in Tricom, but he does show me a little bit here and there. Just pulls me aside, um and I think it's a really cool system. It's a way to combine the traditional martial arts of Kali, of Pekiti-Tirsia, with his police background.
Mm,
And so it's kind of defensive tactics plus Kali combined into one, m- mixed in with all his real world experience, because he's been a police officer for, I don't know, probably 20 years. And he's had to go fight a lot of bad guys. He's had to arrest them. He's had to He's had to fist fight them, that kind of thing. And so he's adapted all of his knowledge and experience into a system that's very easy to teach other people. And again, we're non-denominational, so I have no problem, highlighting what we feel are really good. And if people want to train in that, that's even better than not training at all. And so, yeah, Tricom, a very effective, efficient system, and easy to teach other people from what I've seen. The emphasis is obviously on police officers, so a lot
Yeah.
of the grappling techniques involve how do you control them so you can arrest them. But the way I look at it is, if you're a civilian and you don't have handcuffs, if you've controlled them, then great. Now your friend can call 911, or other bystanders can call 911 while you hold this person down. So I don't want to poo-poo it if you're not law enforcement, because it's still very effective. You'll definitely save lives, whether it's your own or somebody you know.
Cool. Yeah, I'd looked into it a little bit. I just hadn't deep dived very much into it or taken any of their courses or anything like that. So
Mhm.
just kind of curious. All right. And then obviously now we're today you're at Tiga Tactics. So what are you currently training in?
Uh, excuse me. Yeah, so with Tiga Tactics, our whole emphasis is to teach people how to defend themselves and their loved ones on the street. And so really there is no style or system for that. Fighting is fighting, violence is violence. So you have to kind of build a foundation that is systemless, styleless almost. I don't want to get too crazy about this or abstract about this, but there's effective striking, there's some effective grappling, not necessarily on the ground, but like controlling people. There's effective use of weapons, and whether that's the knife, gun, flashlight, tactical pen, what have you. And so we're trying to bring that to mainstream audiences, to soccer moms, to older people, to younger people, to students. Anybody who might not necessarily have any martial arts training at all, as well as to people who have had tons of martial arts experience, right? So we if you go to our Evan, you've been to our in-person seminars, you've seen the gamut of people we get. We get
So wide. It's
yeah, we
insanely
get
wide.
we get everybody from like brand new beginner pacifist to 30-year martial arts master, and everybody in between.
Yeah.
And
We're gonna dive into like the benefits of like why you need to go to a Tiga Tactics seminar on a later episode. But I
mm-hmm,
do just real quick, the with that range of experience, you also get something that I haven't experienced, which is the range of styles, right? Because if I go to a
mm-hmm,
BJJ seminar, it's all BJJ practice. If I go to, Jeet Kune Do or karate or right, it's all those niches, right? So you're just surrounded by other people like you. What I really
right.
liked about Tiga was I showed up and it was like the guy to my right was BJJ, the guy to my left was MMA, two people down was Penjak Salat.
Mm-hmm,
Three people down was Aikido. Four people down
mm-hmm,
was Muay Thai. It was just like,
right.
it was super cool. And then even with like teaching the strikes, seeing how they do some of the, like I'm talking simple stuff, like
Mm-hmm,
throwing a cross or throwing an elbow, and then
mm-hmm,
just seeing the different styles and watching them how they do it. And then like sometimes I'd ask follow-up questions like, oh, why do you do an elbow that way? And it's like, oh, well, if I'm throwing an elbow, I'm already really close, so I'm gonna go right into the takedown. And it's like, okay, that's
mm-hmm,
why
mm-hmm,
the MMA guy is like throwing his whole body behind the elbow because he's
mm-hmm,
going right into the clinch,
right.
versus some of the other people are like they're trying to stay standing and keep that distance. So
Right.
super cool
Yeah.
experience. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No. And that's the to me that's the beauty of training in person and teaching a Tiga Tactics seminar, because we do attract a wide range of people. And because we are non-denominational, we believe that everybody should train in whatever system they want. We make our combatives, our Tiga Tactics combatives, kind of almost modular, in the sense that you could take our architecture, our blueprint, and insert your own system into it, and it would still work. To me, that's the
100%. Yeah.
that's the beauty of Tiga Tactics Combatives, is that it's more of a framework or guide, and you can interject whatever system, whatever weapon, whatever style you like, and it'll still work. And I love that. I love watching different people throw in their own flavor to our recipe. You know, they might throw that, like you said, the elbow differently. They might be setting up for a sweep, or they might be setting up for a weapon draw, and yet it still works within Tiga Tactics Combatives because, as I said before, violence is violence. There is no stylization when it comes to a life and death situation. And so what we've done is we've kind of broken it down into like the the bare the bare movements that humans use, and how you get there is really how you get there is all the same. Everybody, you know, if you have two arms and two legs, like Bruce Lee said, you're going to move a certain way. And so we've kind of figured out those patterns, but the stylization or the flavor, the spice is up to you on how you
Yeah.
want to execute certain things. So that's the really cool thing about Tiga Tactics Combatives, and especially training in person at Tiga Tactics Combatives seminar.
Yeah,
But you did
if there was
go
such a
ahead.
thing as like the martial arts king of the world that had authority over everyone, I would make people learn Tiga tactics first, and then whatever other style they want to learn after to like build on that baseline. But I think just like the knowledge and the material you bring um, as a first layer is just very important for people, both with you know, a lot of the sayings and the mindset, skill set, tool set, and then just some of the basic counters of like what real violence is going to look like on the streets.
Mhm.
That's
Wow, that
again my 2 cents.
yeah, yeah. No, that's your 2 cents is worth like $200 compared to everybody else. So that means a lot coming from you. If obviously if you're listening for this, you might have an indication of what Evan does and who he is. But you know, special forces soldier and obstacle course racing champion. You've got like this wide knowledge
Yeah.
of human movement, and so for you to say that about us is that oh, I'm humbled. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
And I would also you're welcome. I would also add it into like the army has a combatives program, which I've mentioned, right? But
Mhm,
it's focused on combat, which is what it should be
mhm,
focused on, right?
mhm,
If I was king for the day, in charge of all army combatives, I would add another course that is focused on what I'm doing when I'm not actually in combat, right? Because I'm on
mhm,
leave, I'm traveling around foreign countries, I'm not in
mhm.
my kit, I don't have my long gun on me, I may not have my sidearm on me. Sometimes I do. Um,
Right.
but to me, like you take right, the army loves doing all these like online training courses. Again, if I'm chief of staff of the army for a day,
Mhm,
I would make I'd be like, all right, one of our online courses is now Tiga Tactics. Learn this
mhm.
stuff because it's going to keep you safe when you're on leave, when you're not
Right.
actually doing deployment stuff. So
Right.
I just find a lot of value in it, which is again is why I have latched myself onto Tiga Tactics.
Wow. Thank you so much. That means the world to us. So but we
I
appreciate
keep
it.
the more episodes we put out, the more I feel like at some point someone's gonna be like, "Oh, Tiga Tactics 3, right?" Like Conrad, Patrick, and Evan, and I'm gonna be like,
Right.
"Well,
Right.
like, no, not really. It's really two." And I've just clung on at this point. So
That's awesome. We appreciate it. We're honored to have you be a part of our triumvirate, and so that means a lot to us. But yeah, I would, be awesome to train the army or to any military branch. I think what we teach is not, again, it's not style specific. It's not, um, there's no true believers in our system other than to believe that it is effective, right? And so that would be awesome to train military police as well, and we do on an individual level, but to teach whole agencies, that would be an honor and a pleasure.
yeah,
Um, to go back to your other question, what do I train in now? Personally, outside of Tiga Tactics, I still teach Kali every week, but I am a student of Muay Thai and Jiu Jitsu at Rounders MMA Fullerton. I taken Conrad's advice and just dived headfirst into these systems. And what he said was true. He told me years ago, but I I'm a little slower than Conrad, as you can see, and so I'm a mere mortal. He's a demigod. I'm a mere mortal. So it took me a little longer to understand what he meant. But you got to really do these two systems, or any combat sports, really, when you're relatively young. And so uh, I did Muay Thai, and I was like, okay, this is kind of like karate, kind of like kung fu. Yeah, I can do this, no problem. I'm begging with 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and I'm keeping up with them. I feel good. That's cool. But when I started deep diving into jiu-jitsu, I was like, oh my god, this is the most abusive art I have ever studied. And the weird thing is that nobody's striking me, no one's kicking me, no one's trying to poke on my eyes, but yet I am being just totally smashed in jiu-jitsu. And I didn't quite understand why until now, and I should have listened to Conrad much earlier. But yeah, it's just a grueling martial art, and it's not necessarily because you're being hit a lot or you're being people are trying to kill you. I guess they're trying to kill you, but in a very friendly, intimate way. You know what I mean?
Just trying to put you to sleep before you die.
Right, right, exactly. And it's a you can't. There's no, as you know, you're blue belt now, so you've definitely earned those stripes in that color. It's a lot of hard work to get to that level. I'm still just a white belt. I'm getting smashed left and right, and it's the whole thing, the whole training. If you're with a really good jiu-jitsu instructor, from beginning to end, your whole body is being used consistently and constantly, and intensely. Whether it's the warm ups, the rolling, the drilling, the sparring at the end, you're always being taxed in some way. And unless you grew up as a wrestler, then it's no big deal. You're very used to this. But like for a stand up guy like me, who've only done stand up martial arts, there's a whole nother level of training. And it's I'm aching, I'm sore all the time. My neck always hurts. My fingers are
I
all
feel this.
sprained.
I feel all this. Yeah.
My right now, my left wrist is sprained. My ring finger never healed, so it doesn't bend properly, and my right thumb is all messed up. So
Yeah.
it's been a journey.
Yeah, one of my toes is purple right now, because I tripped going in for a takedown last week, and so now it's purple. And then I have a black and blue on the inside of my thigh. I guess someone was forcibly trying to open my guard, and I didn't want that. And I went to Kyle Lee last night, and I was like, what is going on my thigh? Giant black and blue.
Right,
I
right,
remember it hurting after, but I was like, yeah, it's probably nothing. And then
right.
yeah,
They must have got that elbow in really good.
yeah, they must have. Yeah, I don't remember who it was or when it was, but it they obviously did some damage there. But
Right, yeah, yeah.
and I
Oh,
think
and I
that
do.
all I, I think all that's part of being a well-rounded martial artist, right? You need to be comfortable on the ground. You need to be comfortable standing. You need to be comfortable with, striking weapons. You need to be comfortable with shooting weapons. I think that's all part
Right.
of that whole experience. And again, I've looked at some of your past and some of Dr. Conrad's past, and again, I feel like when I find something that I think this works and is intelligent and smart, right, I mimic it, right. So
Hmm.
I've taken a lot of my martial arts, a lot of traditional stuff, and my next time we move, I plan on focusing even like mostly on Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's my future plan for that a little bit down the road. But I also still like enjoy doing some of those, traditional stuff and seeing where they came from and why they were created that way and why they teach things a certain way.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think when a lot of like combat sports guys go and look at traditional styles, they're like, well, why do you do that? That's stupid. It's a waste of time. And you're like, what? Not a waste of time. Like it has a different purpose, So
Right,
like,
right.
I like to use the toolbox analogy, right? So like
Hmm.
in the army, we say if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Hmm.
Um, but you ask someone like, what's a better tool, a hammer or a screwdriver? It's like, well,
Hmm.
depends what I'm trying to do, right?
Right,
So there's, it depends on your, like we were said in the beginning of the podcast, it depends on your goals going into training a specific style.
right.
BJJ may be great for someone, it might be terrible for some people, right?
Exactly.
Muay Thai might be great for people, like some people may do better in Tai Chi or Wing Chun or
Hmm.
whatever. So
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's really what your goal is, and then you find the art that will fit in that. Unless you're a martial arts nerd like me, you, and Conrad, then we'll try to learn everything humanly possible. But if you only have if you have a specific goal or you only have a certain amount of time, then you definitely want to look for a system that fills that purpose. But I agree. There's the combat. I look at these things in three aspects because we're all about three. That Tiga Tactics. Tiga means three. So I think of the first one being traditional martial arts, the second one being combat sports, and then the third one being combatives or reality based self defense. And to me, to be a complete warrior, you should be exposed to all three. You don't have to dedicate your entire life to all three, but you should be exposed to all three so that you know the different contexts and how each one fits in in that realm. And you can always steal from each realm. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
there's always something to learn from everything. And so if you're only focused on combat sports, you know, and I encounter the same people. Actually, I even encounter snobs within combat sports because I know guys who like I only do no gi jujitsu. Gi jujitsu is so fake. Who the hell wears a gi on the street? And I'm thinking, bro, have you never worn a jacket before?
Right.
Like,
You never worn a jacket. That's always my favorite. It's like, do you walk around with no shoes on, shorts, and like a
right,
skin tight top? It's like, is
right,
that how you always walk? That's so weird, man. Like, I
yeah,
think that's weirder than not wearing it in the jacket thing.
right.
Yeah.
So you have these snobs who are just true believers in just what they do, and I think when you close your mind like that, you're gonna miss out on all these amazing other things that you could learn, and possibly adapt in a different way that you never thought of. And I'm sure Conrad delved into his CLOT background, and I'm also learning CLOT from him too. So that's another art that I'm learning. But CLOT is a great system because you can learn a concept, and then you'll see that concept in all these other arts, and you're like, oh my god, this move I'm doing in jiu-jitsu, that's the same move I'm doing in Kali, and it's because CLOT taught me that.
Hmm.
You
Interesting.
know, yeah, yeah. When we get together again, I'll show you one particular thing that. But you know the whole idea, like in jiu-jitsu, there's framing, right? You got to frame
Right.
if
Yeah.
someone's on top of you, right? That movement when you do a frame, that shows up in almost everything in all the martial arts I've learned, and I'm like, oh
Oh,
man,
interesting. Yeah.
I got to share this with Evan and Conrad because it blew my mind when I realized that. So yeah, there's so if you stay close minded, you don't see how those things apply, and you can actually make it better when you see that crossover.
Cool. Yeah. But one of the guys I work with, he calls it the narcissism of small differences, right? Like people like the no gi guy and the gi guy have exponentially more in common than the
Mm-hmm.
no gi guy and the guy who doesn't train martial arts at all, right?
Right.
Like I mean, it's not even close. It's like 95% they're
Right.
similar. It's just a small
Mm-hmm.
difference. And the
Mm-hmm.
same thing even with, the guy who trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the person who trains, Wing Chun or
Mm-hmm.
Tai Chi, like karate, name the martial art. The fact that you're training any martial art makes you have a lot more in common than with someone who doesn't train at all. So, um,
Absolutely.
I always
Absolutely.
enjoy, even if I don't like personally want to practice that art, I always enjoy just hearing what other martial artists have to say and here I especially I really enjoy the logic behind their system and the why. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really fascinating. So
Yeah. I learned in journalism the most important question you can ask is why, because the why will pretty much answer the whole purpose of the answer, you know? And especially in martial arts, you learn the why, and it's like, wow, it's so cool. I learned the culture, the history, the language, everything.
mm, good stuff. All right, we're actually gonna start wrapping it up now. I know we talked a lot longer than I was planning on. Any final things we need to say, final shout outs we need to give before we get going?
No, well, first, thank you to you, Evan, for hosting. This is a really cool experience. I very rarely talk about myself, so it's kind of an odd thing to do. But lo and behold, I did a lot of talking, so I appreciate the effort. I want to thank everybody who's listening. Hopefully, you weren't bored by my biography. It's like reading a resume. You know, if you're into it, then it's interesting. But otherwise, hopefully, I've entertained you guys. And
I thought it was good.
oh, thank you. And you know, obviously, thanks to Conrad, my co-founder. Doing Tiga Tactics with him is such an honor, and I hope that everybody listening gets a chance to join us, train with us in person, because that's our favorite kind of training is training in person. But if not, you know, check out our online programs as well and our social media. Hopefully, we bring you some value, and just, if nothing else, just have you thinking about your own personal protection. That's an extremely important thing, especially with the chaos going on today. So I appreciate you, and hopefully bring you some value today.
Yeah. So, any of our listeners, just make sure you check the show notes. We'll drop some links down there for online courses that are available if you want to see a little more about it and learn what Tiga Tactics is all about. Great opportunity, allows you to train from literally any place in the world. And then we'll drop more links in there for articles we got coming out. I got a bunch of articles I wrote for Tiga Tactics that should be publishing sometime around when this podcast drops. And we'll also keep it, make sure you're checking the website for updates on seminars or webinars that we're putting out. All right, we'll catch everyone later.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.